satellite is the ultimate sky spy. But while satellites are confined to their orbital journey, the airplane is free to go anywhere, anytime. The spy planes of the future will carry more than cameras. They will be floating soldiers with robotic arms and airborne lasers hunting for missiles. But unmanned sky spies are the wave of the future. Some will fly at extreme heights. Others will be invisible to enemy radar. And some will be lumbering giants, staying aloft for months at a time. They will be the most outlandish aircraft ever imagined. Wings of tomorrow, built to keep an eye in the sky. It is a monument to days gone by. It served for almost half a century, and its pilots were characters in the Cold War's darkest chapter. From the downing of Gary Powers to the Cuban Missile Crisis, one aircraft always comes to mind. It's the world's most notorious spy plane, the U-2. But for the U.S. Air Force, the job of aerial reconnaissance is about to change. Military planners wanted something to fly over 24 hours in a single mission. A plane to look deep into enemy territory without risking lives. What they got is a plane without a pilot. In late 1997, the future of tactical reconnaissance arrived at Edwards Air Force Base in California. Under the guidance of the Defense Research Projects Agency, the torch has been passed to a large unmanned aerial vehicle called Global Hawk. The Global Hawk was built to fly at extreme altitude for long periods of time. Its wingspan is vast, stretching over 116 feet. Adding to Global Hawk's outlandish appearance is the V-shaped tail. The tail extends up from beneath the engine, 44 feet from the nose of the aircraft. The Global Hawk's endurance puts the world's biggest passenger planes to shame. It will fly 5,000 miles, patrol the skies for over 24 hours, and then make a 6-hour journey to a friendly airbase, all under the power of one Allison turbofan engine. In all, the Global Hawk can spend 42 hours in the air without refueling. The closer it is to the front line, the longer it can spend getting pictures of the battlefield.
Typical mission of a Global Hawk would be that from up to 3,000 miles from the area of interest, it could take off. It would be launched with a launch and recovery element, and it would get it up into the air and get it to its on station. It would be flying autonomous to on station. We'd be tracking it as it made that trek.
In just 24 hours, the Global Hawk's electronic sensors cover an area the size of Illinois. All the information is instantly fed to a satellite, which sends it directly to Washington. The entire flight is determined before the Global Hawk ever leaves the ground. The mission is planned by people, but flown by computer.
Flying the Global Hawk, it takes about 3 clicks of a mouse to complete your total amount of skills that you need to fly that aircraft. It's an autonomous aircraft. It's not even somebody on the ground using stick and rudder. The plane is flying itself using its own computers.
Flying for over 24 hours above the battlefield won't go unnoticed by those at the other end of the camera. To protect itself, the Global Hawk carries an array of threat warning receivers and radar jammers. It can also confuse missiles by towing decoys at the end of a long wire. But the Global Hawk isn't invisible to radar. When the Air Force doesn't want anyone to know they're around, they rely on stealth. Today, the Air Force has stealth bombers and attack planes, but in the future, they hope to fly a stealthy, unmanned spy plane. The Advanced Research Projects Agency has pooled some of the brightest minds in America to design an aircraft on the cutting edge of aerospace technology. It's called Dark Star, the world's first unmanned stealth plane.
The system is designed much like the B-2 was in that it's an all-wing body configuration with no vertical surfaces. It really is a relatively simple design. You can see it basically is a bunch of straight lines. All of that is for stealth reasons. It is basically all fuel other than the payloads and the structural weight. It weighs about 8,600 pounds. It flies for about 12 hours. And that endurance is predominantly driven by the kinds of missions we want to fly.
The most dangerous missions of all. Flying over hostile territory, looking at targets defended by anti-aircraft guns and surface-to-air missiles in skies that are filled with enemy fighters. Until its retirement, these missions were flown by the Air Force's mighty SR-71 Blackbird. In its third decade of life, the Blackbird is still the world's reigning speed champion. Even so, its age has made it too expensive for operational spy flights.
What used to do the Dark Star mission was the SR-71. It had the ability to basically overfly the majority of heavily defended targets through speed and altitude. We attacked it from the other direction. Rather than using speed and altitude, we used low observables technology, stealth technology.
Like the Global Hawk, the Dark Star's flight is programmed ahead of time on a computer. Its first flight was over Rogers Dry Lake at Edwards Air Force Base.
Igniters, takeoff roll, brake release. Shark Star 01 on a roll. Keys. 60 keys. 70 keys. 80 keys. 90 keys. 100 keys. Rotate.
On March 29, 1996, Dark Star left the ground for the first time. In the skies over Edwards, it followed a pre-planned course under the guidance of global positioning satellites. At the heart of the Dark Star system is an electro-optical camera which takes highly detailed images of the ground. In April 1997, the camera was mounted on a transport plane and flown over San Francisco. A standard television set has 450 horizontal lines of video. The CA-236 camera has a pixel resolution equivalent to over 12,000 lines. These photographs were taken at an altitude of 25,000 feet, at a distance of 9 miles to the east of the targets. Yet the details of San Francisco are strikingly clear. Using satellites, the Dark Star could transmit the images anywhere in the world with just a 2-second delay. The Dark Star can't fly nearly as high as the Global Hawk. Its longest missions will last about 8 hours. The Global Hawk can stay airborne for almost 2 whole days. But when the skies are unfriendly, the Dark Star slips in unnoticed. Whether the goal is endurance or stealth, one thing is certain: unmanned aerial vehicles are the wave of the future.
You strictly use Dark Star in those areas where you have high threats, a lot of air defenses. You use Global Hawk, what's thought to be actually the majority of the time. We see these operating in sort of a 70-30 kind of a ratio, about 7 Global Hawks to 3 Dark Stars as far as what would be required to cover the mission areas.
In autumn 1996, residents of Hondo, Texas, witnessed an odd spectacle. What looked like a strange biplane mounted on the bed of a pickup truck was actually aerodynamic testing of the military's next tactical reconnaissance system, the Outrider. The Outrider isn't nearly as sophisticated as the Dark Star or Global Hawk. It's meant to be flown off rough, unpaved airfields, close to the front line. Soldiers will use it to spot enemy troops and tanks, and sailors can send it looking for unwanted ships. The Outrider communicates with soldiers through a digital data link system. To make certain that communication lines could track Outrider as it moved, engineers attached a receiver to a small Robinson helicopter. A ground terminal was able to track the helicopter without interruption. The first few flights of the Outrider were carried out using remote control. These days, every pilot flies a simulator before stepping in their plane. The same was true with the Outrider, only now it's done using remote control instead of a stick and rudder. Then, on March 7, 1997, Outrider pilots prepared for the real thing. Computer-aided designs and wind tunnel testing predicted that it would leave the ground without a hitch, but nobody was certain what the unpredictable Texas breeze held in store. Engineers thought that Outrider would leave the ground at 70 knots. Then, at only 53 knots, it leapt into the air. The key to the Outrider system is a camera pod that swivels on a 360-degree axis. It's not built to take pictures of entire regions, just the parts of the battlefield important to the soldiers. The Marines plan to launch it from assault ships to make sure no surprises await them at the beach. Providing the pictures is a color video camera with a 10:1 zoom lens. The camera is aligned with a forward-looking infrared system. Infrared gives Outrider a view of the battlefield under the protective cloak of darkness. Back on the ground, the soldiers use just 2 computer workstations and a transmitter dish. The 2 workstations sit side by side in a shelter on the back of a Humvee. The main computer is an industrial-strength laptop. It weighs about 30 pounds, with a 62-bit processor and 32 megs of RAM. The laptop on the right shows a full-screen display from the Outrider's point of view. The computer tells the operator where Outrider is headed and what it's looking at. It automatically ties location and time to all of the pictures and stores it for later analysis. The system is also used to send information to the Outrider. Outrider's location is determined simply by clicking on a computer map. This eliminates possible mistakes when typing unwieldy lists of coordinates. All flight plans are taken care of ahead of time, but the Outrider can be rediverted in flight. For example, if someone wants to have a second look at a suspicious truck, he'll simply change the flight plan. With a few clicks of the mouse, Outrider doubles back. When the Outrider lands, control is handed from the computer to a pair of radio beacons transmitted from either side of the runway. Using a global positioning satellite, the beacons guide the Outrider within just centimeters of the desired landing spot. This donut-shaped hovercraft looks like it belongs in a 1950s science fiction movie. It's called the Cypher, a 6.5-foot UAV built to satisfy the military's need for a spy platform that takes off and lands vertically. Like other UAVs, the mission is watched closely on off-the-shelf computer screens at the base camp. The display is similar to the Outrider. On the right is a bird's-eye view shown in real time. On the left is the map of the flight plan. At any time during the flight, the operator can change Cypher's course by clicking a new spot on the map. Today, the target is a missing person. Actually, he's a Sikorsky engineer who's been instructed to take a stroll through the Florida brush. When the cipher isolates him with infrared tracking, his figure is highlighted and his distance is fed to operators at the camp. As he begins heading west, the cipher follows from a safe distance, all the while keeping an eye on the moving target. Back at the camp, the operator sees the target as an orange square on his map. As the person walks through the fields, his path is displayed as a dotted red line. The cipher lands the same way it takes off, automatically. Beneath the donut-shaped airframe are two antennas which measure altitude. Global positioning navigation ensures that it will land within 1 meter of where the operator wants. Recently, the U.S. Army has flown Cipher through an urban warfare training center at Fort Benning, Georgia. This collection of phony houses and buildings means Cipher will negotiate a labyrinth of alleys and streets. Nearby, Army personnel are shown how to program Cipher's mission. If there are any buildings of interest, the computer is told to check them out. For this flight, the beginning and end point are selected. The computer chooses the optimum flight path. The Cipher may look peculiar, but its performance is nothing to laugh at. It cruises well over 70 knots, reaching heights of 8,000 feet. The simple curved exterior makes it hard to see on radar. One of Cipher's more unique roles will be carried out not in the air, but on the ground. Its designers call it the remote sentry. This version of the Cipher is distinct because of the video camera attached to what appears to be a standard video tripod. The remote sentry is a new way of doing a job that has been part of military tactics throughout history. The Cipher flies to a forward observation point, then lands and shuts down its engine. There, it stands guard, keeping an eye out for unwanted visitors. In this role, Cipher can relay images from its own camera or from other remote sentries further away. The military is exploring other roles for the Cipher. Using a robotic arm, it can deliver messages, food, or other less benign items. With ground-penetrating radar, the Cipher may eventually be used to help alleviate the scourge of landmines. Designers also see a role in the private sector. The Cipher could go inside a smokestack looking for damage, or inspect a hazardous waste site. It may work in conjunction with helicopters, searching areas devastated by natural disasters. Orville and Wilbur Wright showed the world that attaching wings to a fuselage was a good way of getting off the ground. Then a Russian named Igor Sikorsky proved that if you whip the air towards the ground hard enough, you'll go up. Ever since, we've had two ways of flying, airplanes and helicopters. But future sky spies may be neither. This remote-controlled UAV uses a different approach. It's called a tilt body, and it may revolutionize the way we fly. The tilt body UAV was pioneered at the world's oldest airport in College Park, Maryland. Its design dates to the early 80s, when it underwent wind tunnel testing at the nearby university. Today, the Scorpion UAV has returned to its home state for study at NASA's Goddard Research Center. Patrick Coronado is the program manager for the Scorpion.
This would be considered a standard configuration of a normal aircraft or a fixed-wing aircraft. The fuselage is pointing in a direction of flight, and so are the wings. They're pointed straight away. But in this free-wing tilt-body aircraft, the fuselage can tilt up to a predefined angle, as you can see here. As you can see, the wings will maintain the same angle of attack as it was in its normal standard forward-pointing direction.
The result is an airplane that cannot be stalled. The wings on the tilt body are free to move. They act almost like two weather vanes mounted on their side. Despite its revolutionary design, the Scorpion is pretty straightforward. Most of the hardware can be bought off the shelf. The remote control is the same used by model airplane pilots. And in the face of aerospace trends, the Scorpion is flown without relying heavily on computers.
As you may all know, since you all have personal computers at home, computers do crash. We've tried to gear ourselves away from computers and use integrated circuits with intelligence embedded in them, which allows for many of these to be incorporated into the aircraft. So if one fails, one can take over immediately. But it's much easier to do that than put 20 computers on board for redundancy.
The tilt body approach means that the Scorpion can take off and land in extremely short distances. On a ship, the speed of the wind coming over the bow allows it to land vertically. The French Navy was so impressed, they plan on introducing it into the fleet. The Scorpion may have found its calling in maritime patrol, but it isn't limited to the military.
One of NASA's major goals is to try to get an assessment of the health of this world. And we do that by trying to take measurements.
To study man's impact on the environment, scientists rely heavily on satellite photographs. But satellite coverage is often too few and far between to keep up with our environment. This is especially true around coastal areas, where the endless battle between land and sea makes for a rapidly changing picture. Monitoring ecosystems like these requires a plane which is cheap, flexible, and easy to use.
You need to monitor, for example, a body of water 2, 3, or maybe every day a week to try to get an understanding of what's affecting this body of water, such as runoffs from agriculture or insecticides, or worse, you have a man-made disaster, you have an oil spill, for example, you need to monitor continuously. What you want to have is something low cost with good sensors on board that'll go out and fly around and just stay up there for a little while, transmit data directly to a ground station where you would immediately analyze the information. And if you see something, you tell the aircraft to go somewhere else. It allows basically the scientist, the researcher, the environmentalist to have direct access to information that at this current time is difficult to attain.
A major step in the union between aeronautics and environmental study has emerged from a hangar at the Navy's missile range on the Hawaiian Islands. It spans nearly 100 feet, yet it weighs only 500 pounds. It consists almost entirely of wing, adorned from tip to tip with solar-absorbing cells. It is the Pathfinder, and it's the vanguard of an ambitious NASA program called Environmental Research Aircraft and Sensor Technology, ERAST. ERAST is unique, not because it uses aerial reconnaissance to monitor the environment, but because of the kind of airplanes NASA seeks to fly. Its goals are summed up in what many aviation enthusiasts might consider an unlikely creed: slower, higher, longer. When NASA says slow, they mean it. The proposed aircraft will maintain controlled flight at only 15 miles per hour. Higher means reaching 100,000 feet, 18 miles above the Earth. And longer means flying for months at a time. With a wingspan slightly longer than a Boeing 737, it's difficult to accept that the Pathfinder is just a half-scale prototype. The next step is a solar-powered giant called the Centurion. Centurion will have a 200-foot wingspan, covered by a network of solar arrays and electronic fuel cells. During the day, solar panels will power the plane and recharge the fuel cells. At night, the fuel cells will take over, letting the plane stay in the air for months. The Pathfinder arrived in Hawaii during the summer of 1997. The islands were chosen with one thing in mind: sun. Although the Pathfinder has no pilot, all of the scientists and engineers can go along for the ride, thanks to a wing-mounted camera sending video back to the island. The first flight took place in July 1997. In subsequent flights, it didn't take long for the solar-powered giant to go from Pathfinder to record breaker.
The vehicle recently set a world record altitude for solar-powered airplanes of over 70,000 feet. And although the official record keepers don't keep track of things like this, it also flew higher than any propeller-driven airplane has ever flown before. It used the equivalent energy of approximately 5 hairdryers to get to that altitude.
One of the areas which could benefit from this type of aircraft is agriculture. The ability to fly for hours on end makes it the ideal platform for doing a mundane yet vital task: watching crops. Whether you're looking behind enemy lines or monitoring vegetation, the unmanned reconnaissance mission is called remote sensing. Remote sensing can involve conventional aerial photographs or infrared images. But one of the best ways to analyze vegetation involves spectral imaging. In other words, measuring the color spectrum being reflected by the plant.
If we're looking at a tree and using remote sensing, that tree may be giving us measurements telling us how bright it is in a particular wavelength, let's say the visible, which our eye can see. We take that information, that measurement, and in reality a voltage, if you will, coming from that tree, and turn it into an information packet that'll tell us that's a tree. In fact, it may tell us it's a conifer, and in fact it may tell us it's a Douglas fir. And so we use that information coming from the target, if you will, to infer a piece of information which we haven't been able to measure before. And in a lot of cases, we could make that measurement from the ground on one tree, but if we want to look at, say, the entire western U.S. or the entire island of Kauai, we really have to use remote sensing techniques to do that.
One day, a plane like Pathfinder will keep an eye out for tropical storms, warn us about forest fires, and improve our farms. But first, aerospace inventors will strive to build an unmanned giant which will go slower, climb higher, and stay in the air longer than anything in the sky.
These vehicles are really being designed to get the niche referred to as the dull, dirty, and dangerous. Nobody, I can imagine, wants to be sitting in an airplane for weeks or months as sensors monitor crops. That's just not a mission that's suited for a human to undertake. And so those are the reasons that are driving us to the unpiloted vehicle technology.
Just outside of Dayton, Ohio, sits the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. These gently rolling hills bore witness to Orville and Wilbur Wright's earliest investigations into powered flight. Today, the Air Force's Wright Laboratory is looking to the future. Controlling the sky is everything to the U.S. Air Force. Keeping combat pilots ahead of the game is the focus of intense research at the Wright Laboratory. One area of interest: improve the way pilots separate friend from foe.
Part of the issues that the Air Force has right now is the fact that we can shoot further than we can see. If we can build sensors that will allow us to see things at long ranges, we can help keep the pilot out of harm's way.
Sitting on a taxiway at Wright-Patterson is an old F-4 Phantom. Resting on a hillside a mile and a half away, stands a 13-story tower. From here, the entire base is within view. In a room on the top floor sits a labyrinth of mirrors, lenses, and prisms. Through them passes a 1-micron laser beam that scientists think may revolutionize the way pilots look at their surroundings.
What this laser radar, or as we call it, a LiDAR system, does is it will provide us imagery that the pilot can then interpret to make the decision as what he's looking at. Now, we're starting out by looking at what we call spatial information, essentially what is the shape of the object that we're looking at.
The subject of today's experiment is the Phantom. A laser beam will be shot at the plane. Particles will bounce off, some returning to a receiver on the top floor.
Rather than scan a laser beam across the object and acquire the information over a period of time, we want to flood illuminate the object with the beam and capture the image on a single pulse. Now, these pulses are typically only a few nanoseconds or a few billionths of a second long.
In other words, the image will come from a series of two-dimensional snapshots, beginning with the nearest part of the plane and working backwards, 1 foot at a time. In this case, the wing is the closest. The laser will then move up to the nose and finally back to the tail. Back in the tower, the laser is turned on. The entire process takes just 17 microseconds. A computer shows how the laser moves down the aircraft. Afterwards, the computer collects each of the snapshots into one complete picture. The distinctive shape of the Phantom appears like a silhouette. Engineers plan on putting this laser radar into a container the size of a bread box. The laser package can be attached to aircraft of the future, helping pilots see in ways that conventional radar can't. But laser researchers see potentials far beyond what was demonstrated today.
The laser radars are versatile enough that it allows us to go to other kinds of information. Perhaps we can measure the vibration of the target or even some of its color characteristics. And coupling all this information together will allow us to make the decision, what is it that we are looking at?
The Air Force is also exploring laser technology for jobs that go far beyond looking at other planes. At the Phillips Laboratory near Albuquerque, New Mexico, the Air Force tests the lasers of tomorrow. Perhaps the most well-known is a massive laser telescope built to unveil the secrets of distant galaxies. But some high-energy lasers are being developed for a less discreet job. The threat of long-range ballistic missiles was the driving force behind some of the most extraordinary and expensive defense systems in history. One of the most memorable programs during the Cold War 80s was Ronald Reagan's famed Star Wars missile defense system. The idea was ambitious, to say the least. It shook the foundations of superpower standoff and is viewed by many as a major factor in ending the Cold War. Today, the idea has been reincarnated with a less cinematic name, the space-based laser. Although intercontinental ballistic missiles remain a threat, short and medium-range missiles have captured the attention of military planners. These weapons can carry nuclear and biological warheads, and unlike long-range missiles, they can be moved. During the Gulf War, the Iraqi military frustrated coalition forces with their elusive Scud missiles. Mobile launchers will always be able to hide. What the U.S. Air Force wants to do is wait until they're launched, then knock them out of the sky. In the summer of 1995, engineers at TRW displayed the convincing power of their high-energy laser. The targets were large metal cylinders, similar to the metallic skins of theater ballistic missiles. In autumn 1996, the Air Force decided to see what would happen if one of these lasers were put in a 747 jumbo jet. The Airborne Laser Project was born. Boeing engineers went to work transforming a passenger plane into a missile hunter. The most noticeable change is a large turret built into the nose. The turret is used for tracking the missile and firing the laser. Most of the other changes are on the inside. The airborne laser will be manned by a crew of 8. The main workstation is towards the front of the plane, where business class passengers would normally sit. Here, crew members monitor the battlefield, keeping an eye out for missile launches. Upstairs is a galley where the crew can eat, sleep, and relax on long missions. The rest of the plane is dedicated to the laser. In the back sits tanks of hydrogen peroxide, chlorine gas, and iodine, the necessary ingredients to create a lethal stream of photons. The aircraft carries enough laser fuel to shoot down 40 missiles. The Air Force hopes to deploy the airborne laser anywhere in the world at the first sign of hostilities. It will get to the war zone within 24 hours. With in-flight refueling, the crew can begin to hunt for missiles without having to land. As soon as a missile is launched, the early warning radar alerts the crew. The goal is to destroy the missile while it's still in its vulnerable boost stage. As soon as it breaks the cloud cover, the ABL hones in on the missile with a low-energy laser. With the target still in its sights, the crew unleashes a high-energy laser to finish the job. A few seconds is all it takes to break the metal skin. Without crossing into enemy skies, the airborne laser flies in a large figure-8 pattern, waiting for other missiles to launch. Each shot costs about $1,000 in expended fuel, much less than the ground-to-air missiles used in Desert Storm. The airborne laser is expected to handle multiple launches. The location of every launch is handed over to attack pilots to make sure it doesn't happen again. Missile defenses have become more sophisticated, but so have the missiles. Some launch systems use decoys to confuse the enemy. This adds to an already messy array of fuel tanks and other debris separating from the warhead. The job of isolating one warhead in a sky full of unknowns is an essential task, according to the DoD's Ballistic Missile Defense Organization. To explore this side of missile hunting, the military has launched the Airborne Surveillance Test Bed, or AST. Like the airborne laser, the AST is a reincarnated passenger plane. A large cupola has been built into the Boeing 767, giving it an almost reptilian appearance. Inside the cupola is a large infrared sensor. This infrared system is so sensitive, designers claim it can detect the heat of a human body against the cold background of space from over 1,000 miles. But to test its ability to find and track missiles, the Army decided to put it up against the real thing. A Thales Ares missile was launched off the coast of the eastern United States. The AST located the missile's second stage booster just 83 seconds after liftoff. A minute later, the missile dropped 2 decoy balloons. The infrared camera fed the images back to the computer, which instantly resolved them as two separate objects. The missile then dropped two more large cylinders, adding to an already messy picture. The plane was now tracking the missile, the second stage booster, the two balloons, and the three decoys. All of the objects were followed closely throughout the flight. The process lasted about 10 minutes, when the debris burned up during re-entry into the atmosphere. All the while, the AST managed to keep an eye on the missile. One of the U.S. Air Force's future Sky Spies has already taken off. It's called the Joint Surveillance Target Attack Radar System, or JSTARS. JSTARS is a modification of one of the world's first jetliners, the Boeing 707. The obvious difference is a long canoe-shaped radar dome attached to the bottom of the fuselage. JSTARS first flew operationally during Desert Storm, yet it didn't officially enter service with the U.S. Air Force until the end of 1997. Its job is straightforward. Look at the ground and tell soldiers what the enemy is up to. Inside are 18 separate workstations. During wartime, the plane can accommodate up to 34 crewmen for missions lasting over 20 hours. To the layperson, JSTARS doesn't seem high-tech. But what makes it a spy system for the 21st century isn't looks, it's information. JSTARS is the centerpiece in a vast communication and reconnaissance network that links soldier to satellite. This link will be more important than ever as space becomes an integral part of the battlefield. Satellites already provide navigation, photography, and communication. Soon, satellites will even be used to help combat pilots hide from the enemy.
There's really a unique new capability that's being studied that circumvents a problem that military aircraft have right now, and that is when they use their radar systems, they're exposing themselves. As soon as you turn your radar on, a lot of people know exactly where you are.
But if the radar comes from space, there's no need to worry. Radar satellites let the plane view the enemy without turning into a moving target.
The radar signal kind of comes down from the satellite, bounces off the target, and then gets picked up by a radar receiver that's located perhaps in an unmanned aerial vehicle that's loitering in a pretty high threat kind of environment. So that really provides a unique capability wherein you can receive the radar information without giving away your location.
During the Bosnian conflict, Air Force satellites came of age. Satellite photographs pinpointed artillery sites and other military positions. This intelligence cleared the way for the NATO airstrikes, which changed the course of the war. Satellites revealed the presence of mass grave sites, giving evidence of war crimes. They gave precise navigation during the rescue of Scott O'Grady, and even helped monitor the first free election in the history of the war-torn region. The satellite communicates with helicopters, airplanes, soldiers, and submarines. It is the apex of a vast cone of information. Without it, the entire network would fall apart.
As the U.S. military becomes more and more dependent on satellite systems to defend the United States, those systems become very, very valuable, and we need a way to defend those systems. Right now, we don't have that, and that's a dangerous thing.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Cover!
This little machine seems to defy gravity.
Cover homing.
This unusual display is a test bed for a strange new spacecraft built to hunt down enemy satellites. Here, designers are testing how well such a machine can be controlled with an array of small rocket engines. In theory, the spacecraft will lurk quietly in orbit, searching for anything that spies on American soil. Beyond this, most of the program is a secret, but from what we can tell, at least this test was successful.
Cover tracking. Cover. Roll. Woo! All right. Whoa. Perfect. Right on. Hey!
In the 21st century, virtual training will be more important than ever. The U.S. Air Force has conceded that in an era of fiscal austerity, simulation will increasingly supplant actual flying time. But the military prefers the real thing. The move to virtual training has been difficult to accept, and high-level officers are demanding that virtual training systems make their pilots feel like they're actually flying. To get Pentagon approval, computer programmers must create simulated environments which mirror reality. Controls must feel authentic, weather conditions should look real, and most of all, the terrain needs to be exact. One company, Evans & Sutherland, has been in the simulation business since the beginning. In the quest for more realistic flight simulators, aerial photography has found a new outlet, creating virtual landscapes anywhere in the world.
We're able to very quickly take photographs, scan them, correlate them, extract features from them, and use them in our flight simulation applications.
Here, an airplane has taken a string of aerial photographs. In this case, the target is New York City. The problem is, the camera was moving and the pictures show Manhattan from different angles. But in reconciling the images, we enter the realm of 3D.
When we're ready to visualize the two images as they overlap, we end up with a simultaneous visualization. It looks much like a big hodgepodge. It's very hard to recognize. When we use a special pair of polarized sunglasses where one eye is only allowed to see one photograph and the other eye is only allowed to see the other photograph, then our left and our right eye perception of the stereo images is now available to us.
By correlating the two images, the computer software creates a three-dimensional model of Manhattan. Now, texture and color can be added to the buildings, streets, and bridges. In the end, we see the same view a helicopter pilot might see flying over the Hudson River.
We have used the texture or the imagery and done a paint job on the side of the buildings. All of this is done with this software package. And this might be an entertainment application, or you might consider instead of Manhattan Island, you might consider some other area of interest like Baghdad.
Or Salt Lake City. In the year 2002, the mountainous terrain of northern Utah will host the Winter Olympics. By then, virtual journeys may help the unfamiliar tourist find Olympic venues, much the way it guides a pilot into his target.
People who will be visiting this city, Salt Lake City, for the Olympics in 2002, when you come to a strange city and someone tells you that a particular venue that you're interested in, the downhill or the bobsled or any of the venues, they tell you it's up the canyon and off this way. You're always at a loss as to exactly how to get there. With the same technique of training pilots to recognize their target, we might want to train visitors to the city to understand how to get to the different Olympic venues.
As we approach the anniversary commemorating a century of flight, the job of aerial reconnaissance seems to be coming of age. The sky spies of the future will come in all shapes and sizes. Pilotless planes that fly themselves, going places we dare not go. Technologies which change the way we fly and fight. Innovations which let us see our world in a way we've never seen it before.